Hi, everyone. It's Jason Burek of Wall Street from Main Street. Thanks again for tuning into our podcast and for helping us get over 2 million views on our YouTube channel and over 10,000 iTunes downloads per month. We have a special offer for our Wall Street for Main Street listeners that has proven to be a good investment based on plenty of 5-star reviews from satisfied customers and independent fashion bloggers. Mo and I recently tried some shoes from a new company which is run by a family of third-generation shoemakers called Grant Stone Shoes. These are classic Goodyear Welt shoes using full-grain leathers from world-renowned tanneries. In a world filled with disposable products, it can be difficult to find items which can be used for years and later passed down to the next generation. Grant Stone is a smaller brand going direct to the consumer, which offers unprecedented value. Quality and fit is the cornerstone of their program, and the customer response and reviews confirm this. These are high-quality shoes at a good price for the busy professional who wants to improve their appearance at the office, in the boardroom, or out on the town with your girlfriend or wife. Or, if you're single like me, you know you will look good with these shoes on and maybe impress the ladies with your style and taste. But if the ladies love Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders and hate free markets or capitalism or entrepreneurs, at least I will look and feel good in my comfy Grant Stone shoes. Mo and I have worked out a special offer for our listeners. So when you go to grantstoneshoes.com, enter the code GOLD, that's G-O-L-D, for 10% off any purchase. That's grantstoneshoes.com and enter promo code GOLD.
Hey everyone, Mo is here from Wall Street from Main Street, and today we have a returning guest. He is Dr. Mark Thornton. He is a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. Dr. Thornton, thank you for joining us again.
Mo, it's great to be back on your show.
So for this podcast, I want to take a deep dive into Donald Trump's economic policy now that he's been elected, surprisingly. I think it surprised a lot of people that he actually got elected. Surprised me, so I thought crooked Hillary was going to win, but I guess people weren't trustworthy of Hillary. So we got Donald Trump for the next 4 years, which is going to be very interesting and curious because he is a wild card. So let's get a deep dive on his economic policies. If you had a chance to look at it, a lot of it entails cutting taxes, which is good, but also it entails spending more, which is something that the previous administration had done. It looks like he's going to continue it, even though it's going to be a little different, but still, government spending is government spending. So I want to get your thoughts on his economic policies and what you think of it.
Well, Mo, you're right. The election was certainly a surprise. I've been thinking for 4 years that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president and didn't really have any reason to suspect otherwise until the last couple of days before Election Day, when we started seeing the polls getting closer, and of course that would continue. If that continued in the time period when they weren't actually polling, then it gave Trump a fighting chance to win the election and to win the Electoral College, at least. And so that was the only inkling I had, was that the polls seemed to be closing in important states like Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and even Pennsylvania. But he won Pennsylvania, but the polls were still pretty widely apart going into that weekend.
Yeah, and I was watching on election night, and once I saw that he won Florida, I kind of got the idea that he may actually win this thing. And then once he won Ohio, then it was over. He had the election.
Yeah, he sure did. And of course, nobody's talked about his economic policy. The media has been basically talking about the Clinton scandals on the one hand and the personality disorder that Donald Trump has. And so we never really got a chance to learn about, to talk about, to debate, real economic policies that are going to be, or at least might, if enacted, have real impacts on the American economy. And you're also right that he seems to be leaning in a Reagan-esque type of agenda. I think that's his blueprint going forward, because he's, of course, going to be advocating income tax cuts and simplification, corporate tax cuts and simplification, and that has much to recommend it. I mean, if you cut income taxes and you cut the corporate tax and make everything simpler, then that could very well lead to increases in jobs in the economy, and of course encourage more corporate investment here in the United States. So as far as the tax cuts are concerned, they do remind me of Reagan. They would be beneficial for the job market and for investment. And of course, Austrians always advocate for lower government taxes and government spending. And so as far as the tax cuts are concerned, I think that's a positive. And the other positive that I think is really noticeable is his promise to get the government out of energy markets. In particular, the EPA regulations, carbon regulations, all of that's been going on quite extensively, especially under President Obama. They put the coal industry pretty much out of business, and they bankrupted, I think, all of the major coal companies in the United States. So that if we can deregulate energy markets and bring the coal industry back online, that's also something that's going to have an enhanced effect. Really, the lifeblood of the American economy is energy and energy prices. And if we bring down energy prices, that's going to be very helpful for the economy, because natural gas, oil, coal, and other alternative energies, as the price of these things come down, it means that more jobs will be created in productive industries that produce goods and services. Oil is used to produce just about everything, including plastics and plastic bags, all sorts of things. And so lower prices there means that we're going to get more production out of the American economy, and that's where we're really hurting the most. We have all these retail places everywhere. In my hometown of Auburn, Alabama, I mean, it's just one retail center after another going up, and and also building of apartments and condos and houses. That's all fine and good, but that comes secondarily in an economy. We need to be producing goods and services. That's what really makes things go, and makes an economy thrive. And I think lower energy prices are going to be very helpful. So tax cuts and deregulating energy and other sectors of the economy, such as the financial sector, that's all going to be very important, and they're both positive things that I think are capable in the otherwise dysfunctional Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we definitely need to get the government out of the energy industry. If you look at all the investment that the Department of Energy have made to solar companies and other alternative energy, a lot of them went bust. They have invested in Tesla and SpaceX and Solar City, but those three companies have yet to consistently gain positive cash flow. So that one is still to be determined. But overall, the Department of Energy has been a failure in terms of capital ventures. So yeah, I definitely think they need to get out of that industry. But when you talked about Reaganomic, and that's what people would call supply side uh, economic. So for people out there that don't know what supply side economic is, could you explain that to them? And also, what does the Austrian School of Economics say about supply side economic? Does it really work?
Well, the Keynesians are demand side economics, and that's obviously a failure. We could go on talking about the failure of demand side economics forever. And supply side economics arose in the 1970s as a new thread of thinking for economic policy, because Keynesian economics was shown to be a failure, because in the 1970s we had stagflation. For the first time, really, a combination of positive inflation, rising rates of inflation, increases in the consumer price index, and so forth, as well as high levels of unemployment. So you had both high levels of unemployment and high levels of inflation, which the Keynesians said could not happen. And so the Keynesians went into disrepute, and there was this rise in supply-side economics. And it's really not a school of thought so much as it is a line of policy thinking, and the idea there is to, most importantly, to cut taxes and to deregulate the economy, and that's supply-side economics, and that's what they think is good for the economy. And in general, I agree with this thread of thinking about economic policy, but it's not, strictly speaking, a separate school. They don't have a different methodology or anything like that. It's a very narrow approach, and it's an approach to economic policy, and so it doesn't have its own independent school of economic thought. There's not really a lot of academic supply-side economists, and most of the famous supply-side economists are no longer even with us. Art Laffer is really one of the main leading supply-side economists still around, and they do have other views, but those views will generally come into conflict with the Austrian school. For example, we both, generally speaking, argue that we need to return to a gold standard. But what the supply side economists think there is that the Fed would set the price of gold. Originally, they wanted it to be $400 an ounce back in the 1980s. Of course, that's wildly unrealistic today. So they would probably say, well, let's set the price of gold in terms of dollars at $1,200 per ounce. And that's a flawed pseudo gold standard in the eyes of Austrian economists. Austrian economists, by and large, it's not a uniform policy within Austrian economic circles, but we would actually like to see, instead of putting the Fed in charge of some scheme like that, we'd like to see just a return to the real gold standard, where the government and minting companies mint up gold and silver coins, and that ultimately we'd like to see is that the coin itself is a weight of gold or a weight of silver, the way it was traditionally for hundreds and hundreds of years, so that the British pound actually represented, at one time in the long ago past, a pound of silver, and all of the other European currency units were just other ways of weighing an amount of gold or silver, or different weights of gold or silver. And so every coin around the world could be interchangeable with other foreign coins. So that's the type of system that most Austrians want to go back to, is where you have gold basically trading in international markets and silver trading in domestic markets. It's a system that works very well. It works on its own. Basically, you don't have to have a government bureaucracy trying to determine money supply or interest rates or anything like that. And it's what what civilization was based upon. Once we got a metallic money, and once the use of metallic money spread around the globe, that's when you saw the rise in the standard of living from basically a very primitive style of living to what we have today, which is a highly advanced capitalist economy.
What I think made Reaganomics work so well back in the 1980s is that the economy wasn't over leveraged like it is today. I mean, look at today. We have so much debt in the global economy that wasn't there in the 1980s. So I think supply side economic worked pretty well back then. But now I'm not sure if cutting taxes and more spending and reducing regulation would work now. So what do you think?
Well, you're absolutely right to bring up that point, because the amount of leverage and the amount of debt in today's economy dwarfs the levels of debt back in the 1980s. That's when the national debt crossed the $1 trillion mark for the first time. Now we're at 19 trillion, and we face the prospects over the next several presidencies of hitting the unfunded liabilities in Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, federal pensions, military pensions, and so forth. So the problem is much, much greater. The private sector is also much more leveraged, and individuals are much more leveraged. The average family now has $150,000 in debt, and that includes mortgage, that includes student loans, that includes credit card debt, and other minor forms of debt. But that's much, much higher than America in the 1970s and 80s, when the personal savings rate in the 1970s was 12% or even higher in some years. The Americans, the savings rate has been declining, and right before the crisis hit in the housing bubble, it was down to 0%. As Americans consumed their capital, they took out second mortgages on their house, and they actually were consuming more than they were saving. And what's got to happen to get economic recovery and a solid foundation is that we have to reduce the overall level of debt in the economy. We have to increase the amount of real savings in economy, and so those are incredibly difficult problems moving forward. And I think you have to take direct aim at those problems in encouraging reductions in the amount of debt at the government, at the corporate, and at the individual level, and to increase savings at the individual family level. And of course, with the corporate situation, I think that Trump and others are correct that if you reduce the corporate or eliminate the corporate tax, that a lot of those profits that corporations have on their books that are overseas could be released and could be used to help really restabilize our capital structure here in the U.S. economy.
So you don't think Trump economic policy will be enough to save the economy? You think it has to get worse before it gets better?
Oh, yeah. I think no matter who was elected here, that we have enormous economic problems, enormous economic and financial imbalances in the economy, and we have stock and bond markets that are at record highs, and I think that those a lot of those record highs are going to vanish, and we've seen a little bit of that in other countries, and we're seeing higher interest rates on government debt, and as the interest rates on government debt, which was at all-time historic lows in the U.S. and in Europe, of course, in Japan, we've got negative rates. But I think a lot of that's going to reverse itself, and it's going to make it very difficult in the economy as the interest burdens for governments and for corporations and for individuals. I think there's a lot of potential pain out there in the economy that could not be resolved if you gave Donald Trump a blank check to do whatever he wanted to. Could not certainly be resolved if Hillary Clinton was elected president, or even Gary Johnson, the Republican governor who ran on the Libertarians' ticket. His policies were probably better than all the other candidates, and yet I still would see very large economic problems as we move into 2017.
Yeah, a lot of this problem is due to the Federal Reserve and the money printing and the bubble they created in the asset market, such as the stock market and real estate as well. And that's something that no president can tackle without some kind of a short-term pain.
Yes, that's right. I mean, a lot of short-term pain in this case. I mean, we've had 7 or 8 years now of financial repression with central banks, cutting interest rates to zero and then engaging in quantitative easing programs. And, they've made it almost impossible for people to save and get any kind of interest return on their money. And with positive price inflation in the economy and near zero interest rate, my savings account earns me 0.01 of 1% interest. I mean, that's ridiculous.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. Yeah, that's nothing. And that's a major, major problem, and not just for me, but when you think about it in terms of insurance companies and pension plans and retirement plans, all of those have to take money today and invest it in something that's stable over the long haul and earns interest. Well, all the things that are stable in the long haul are earning very little interest. And so these insurance companies, these pension plans, these retirement accounts have been placed through policies of financial repression in an untenable position. And so they've had to take on greater risks and expend more resources on risk management and to leverage up their situation. And so what were the stabilizing, very important stabilizing and defense mechanisms in a capitalistic economy have been put into a very serious and risky situation. Insurance defends us, defends our house, defends our car, defends our health, defends us against business liability, all sorts of things. And of course, retirement accounts are a great form of savings, very often tax-free, and and then they provide us with the potential to retire before we die, or to bail us out from some sort of major catastrophic economic effect. And so those are great industries. They're wonderful manifestations of capitalism at their best, and they've been put by the Federal Reserve in what I would consider, I don't study these industries in their books and their balance sheets, but I would think that they're in a very bad place with expectations for interest rate hikes coming along as we speak.
What's going to suck for Trump, is that if we do have an economic crash, I think a lot of people are just going to easily blame it on him, which is probably unfair because this is the work of something that started during the Bush administration when they started to lower interest rate and print all that money. So he's probably going to take all the blame if we have a crash in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I have a tough time sympathizing with Donald Trump, given his personality flaws and given the fact that he's so wealthy. I mean, I'm not jealous of him, but he is in a very difficult place here, Mo. But if he has followed the Reagan playbook, then he realizes that deregulation helped a tremendous. It was started under Jimmy Carter too. Was a tremendous boom later in his first term and in his second term. Telecommunications prices came way down. Energy prices and the availability of natural gas went up significantly. And we went through a hell of a time in the early 1980s when Paul Volcker was chairman of the Fed, raised interest rates so that, the mortgage rates were like 18%. And the inflation rate in the economy was, at one point, was 10%, and the unemployment rate was at 10% as well. So we were in a mini economic depression in the early 1980s. And so what Reagan's policies did was to front load all of the economic fallout from his policies, the tax cuts, the deregulation, all that stuff. It washed out all of the stagflation from the U.S. economy and got interest rates to the point where people were saving a lot of money and making that available for capital investments. Because, well, I remember my father at the time, he said, if I can get 18% on a government bond, we're putting every last penny that we can possibly scrounge up and possibly save into those government bonds at the time. They'd sort of, they'd spiked up and then leveled off. And, and savings, real savings, is what helps to heal the wounds that the Federal Reserve puts onto the economy. And so that's my hope. I mean, I'm always an optimist. And so I'm trying to look at the best possible scenario for President-elect Trump, and I am hopeful that given that people think he has a mandate, which is unlikely, and that he's following the Reagan playbook, I don't think he understands all this stuff at a very high level, but I think he understands it enough to realize that that was a means of economic recovery. He said some bad things about the Federal Reserve, which was music to my ears. He's made a couple of comments positive towards reestablishing the gold standard. And of course, Reagan did that as well. He made some positive comments and pushed the U.S. Gold Commission in the early 1980s. It didn't go anywhere except, to get these Liberty coins minted and available to the American public to purchase. So that's what we got to hope for, realizing that there's, in all likelihood, going to be some significant economic pain to pay during this process.
Now, with supply side economic, we can still have inflation or stagflation. I'm asking because we saw the price of gold and silver go down a lot last week after he got elected. I think a lot of people out there are thinking, I don't know what they're thinking. I think they're thinking that inflation's going to go away now, or we're going to have deflation now. But I don't think so, because he's going to still spend a lot of money. We're still going to have our debt's still going to go up, and there's still going to be a lot of deficit spending.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And I think the short-term reactions, especially in a surprise outcome like this, you really have to set those things aside because what people anticipate based on these changes and what actually happens based on the actual changes may be very, very different. For example, bank stocks have gone up enormously. Gold mining stocks have fallen tremendously. And I think those are short-term reactions to the situation and to the noticeable increase in long-term government bond interest rates. And higher interest rates make buying and holding gold more expensive to the buyer, and so the price goes down. The stock prices of miners go down, and higher interest rates also give banks the idea that their profitability going forward, if the cost of their money is near zero, and the interest rate they can get from buying government bonds or making mortgages, there's the spread or the profits increase. And so I think those are two short-term reactions that may not pan out over the long term. They haven't solved any of the world's economic problems at this point. And so I don't think investing in banks is going to be necessarily a great investment right now. And I still think there's a role for gold in the sense that the world is a very uncertain place, and you're going to have significant problems in European government bond markets. You're going to see a lot more bankruptcy, both in Europe and in the U.S. And I'm talking about, corporate bankruptcies, individual bankruptcies, student loan defaults growing, and that's of course a much more significant market these days. As student loans, it was almost didn't really matter when I was in college, but now it's gotten hugely larger market in these student loans as the cost of college has increased. Students are just borrowing more money, and so we have all these stumbling blocks to get to or to get through in the process of economic recovery. And at this point, I don't think that there's any turning back. I don't think that there's any positive point that central banks unleashing new waves of quantitative easing, is that really going to have any beneficial or healing effect? I don't think it's going to have any effect, any positive effect in the economy. And I think ultimately what we're going to see is that people are going to understand that the Fed policy since 2007 has only made a bad situation much larger and much worse.
Yeah, I agree. So before I let you go, I want to talk about one subject that you covered for about a decade, and that is the skyscraper curse. Now, just want to talk about that and talk about something that kind of bothers me all the time about when I see a new skyscraper being built or a stadium or arena being built. They tend to use government taxpayer dollars to help build a stadium. For example, in Las Vegas, they just approved to provide about $750 million of taxpayers' money to build a football stadium for the Oakland Raiders to move there, as they do. Just recently, well, thankfully, they voted no. In San Diego, they wanted about over $1 billion to build a new stadium for the San Diego Chargers. That got voted against, so that's not going to happen. So it's always bothered me that they try to use taxpayer dollars to increase the wealth of the owners, and all we get out of it is overpaid or overpriced sporting event tickets and overpriced concussion food, and etc. So do you think the government providing taxpayer dollars has led to inefficiency in the market?
Oh, absolutely. There's absolutely no need for it. If governments could agree not to get involved in these things, then the owners would either build stadiums, arenas, and so forth, or they would lease them from other people. Jerry Jones of the Texas Cowboys, I mean, his new stadium was self-financed almost entirely, and made a huge amount of money off of that so far. But as part of the problems in the economy, I think some of the cracks are being seen right here, is that viewership of NFL football is down significantly, and the number of cable subscribers is also falling precipitously. And so people are seeing the cost of what's going on here, and they're pulling the plug on cable. They're pulling the plug on the NFL and other sports, excuse me. And so the economic problems are exposing themselves, and companies like ESPN, who've made multi-year, multi-billion-dollar agreements with all of these sports leagues, they're seeing their subscribers dwindle. And everybody who has cable gets ESPN, and ESPN gets $7 for each customer, roughly speaking. And and so our cable bills are exploding, as well as our cell phone bills, and people are going to have to cut back on these things. And this is going to expose, what the Federal Reserve has been doing in terms of keeping consumption high and savings low, to keep all of this extraneous stuff going. And so that's a big issue, but it's separate from the skyscraper curse, although tangentially related. The skyscraper curse is the conjunction of building a world tallest skyscraper, setting a new record for livable height, and the onset of a major global economic crisis. And this is something that I've been documenting for a new book that's going to come out probably early next year. And it shows that this skyscraper curse effect has been going on since late in the 19th century, and matching up with things like the Panic of 1907, the Great Depression, the stagflation of the 1970s, the tech bubble, and of course the housing bubble. The housing bubble was the first one that occurred that came after the publication of my 2005 article, Skyscrapers and Business Cycles, which is available for free on the internet. And so I was able to predict the housing that there was a housing bubble, starting in early 2004, and basically predicting the housing bust. And I even put out a blog post in August of that year saying that the Dubai Tower over in the Middle East had set a new record for livable height. And everything in the economy at that point was rosy. Stock markets and bond markets were at very new highs. Unemployment was almost non-existent, and people laughed at me. And but by that time next year, we realized that we really were in an economic crisis, and the stock market had crashed, and unemployment was marching up, and things were coming apart, and there was all sorts of mortgage foreclosures. And so I think I think it's and I explain this in my book as to why they are actually connected, but you can also read the article in the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics to see the core of the argument. And as far as your listeners are concerned, they are building right now another world record setting skyscraper in Saudi Arabia, and it's under construction. It has nowhere near record height at this point, but it's supposed to set a new world's record. And so that confirms my fundamental analysis that going out to 2017 and 18, we should start to see at least the beginnings of this crisis. It's scheduled to open in the year 2020, and it'll probably set the record sometime in 2018. I don't know at this point. These projects are usually secret, and this one's being built out in the middle of the desert, so they have an easier time of concealing what's going on out there. But it's an omen of bad things ahead in the economy, I'm afraid to say.
So where are we in this skyscraper curse? Have we peaked, or is there still ways to go? Or are you seeing people starting to slow down in terms of building new skyscrapers?
Well, I mean, there's skyscrapers being built all around the world.
Right.
Multiple projects in New York City, multiple projects in the Middle East, and in China they're building an enormous number of super tall skyscrapers, and we're headed for a new record for super tall skyscrapers being built this year. And the project in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom Tower, is supposed to be 1 kilometer tall, which would, for absolute height, that's a big increase in the record. But in terms of livable space, it's only about a dozen floors taller than the tower in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And I think the Kingdom Tower is about 300 stories tall right now, so it's not even at the halfway point as far as the information that I've been able to obtain. So we still have more time for this to play out, but it is planned. It is under construction. They've had some delays in this project, which is typical, but it is definitely a warning, an omen of bad things to come.
Well, Dr. Mark Thornton, I'd like to thank you for your time. And if people want to find out more about your work, where can they go?
Well, most of my stuff is on Mises.org. That's MISES.org. I'm on Twitter at Dr. Mark Thornton. And of course, we have a very active Facebook page for the Mises Institute. And there's just a tremendous amount of pertinent information coming out. We have, election analysis, we have market analysis, we have issue analysis, and we also provide, the basic methodology and approach to Austrian economics. And almost all of our materials is available for free for reading and downloading. And we're open 24/7, 365. So I encourage everybody to come visit MISES.org and start learning some real economics. If you're listening to Mo's podcast, then you'll definitely be interested in visiting our website.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thornton, for your time.
Thank you.